There is a fruit so sweet that when you bite into the dried version, your brain cannot tell the difference between it and raw honey. Same caramel sweetness, same thick, dense, golden flavor. Same immediate sugar rush that hits the back of your tongue and spreads forward like warm syrup. Except it is not honey. It did not come from a bee. It did not come from a hive. It did not require a beekeeper, a smoker, a suit, a single sting, or a $600 startup kit. It grew on a bush, in dirt, in a forgotten backyard in New Mexico where nobody had watered it since the previous owner died. With zero water beyond what the sky provided, zero spraying, zero pruning, zero fertilizer, zero attention of any kind for decades. And the bush that produced it is still alive, still fruiting, still dropping 80 pounds of honey-flavored fruit every fall, while the beekeeper down the road loses another. 40% of his colony to varroa mites and neonicotinoid pesticides. The fruit is the jujube Ziziphus, jujuba, known across Asia for 5,000 years as the honey date, the fourth most cultivated fruit tree on planet Earth. Grown on over 5 million acres worldwide, eaten by 2 billion people, and virtually unknown in the country that claims to have the most advanced agricultural system in human history. There are more jujube trees on Earth than apple trees. Let that settle. More jujubes than apples. More jujubes than pears, plums, and cherries combined. The fourth most common fruit on the planet, and you have probably never tasted one. You have probably never seen one. You might not even be able to spell the name. This is not an accident. This is a $20 billion honey industry, a $300 billion processed sugar industry, and a $50 billion fruit industry working exactly as designed, keeping you ignorant of a bush that replaces all three, for free, for 60 years. From a single planting that costs $12, before we get into this, if these stories matter to you, the best way to protect this knowledge is simple. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share this with someone who deserves to know what the food industry prays they never discover. In 1908, a USDA plant explorer named Frank Meyer walked 1,800 miles across northern China, collecting plant specimens for the United States government. He crossed deserts where summer temperatures exceeded 110 degrees. He climbed mountain passes at 12,000 feet where the air cut his lungs. He slept in village inns infested with vermin. He contracted diseases that would eventually destroy his health. He did this because the USDA had sent him to find plants that could transform American agriculture. And because Frank Meyer believed, with the conviction of a man willing to die for it, that the plants of Asia could feed America better than anything the country was currently growing. He was right. The soybeans he collected became a $60 billion American industry. The Chinese pistache he shipped back grows in millions of American landscapes. The disease-resistant peach rootstocks he found still anchor the California peach industry today. But among the dozens of species he shipped back to Washington, one obsessed him more than any other, the jujube. Meyer wrote in his field notes that the jujube was the most important fruit tree in northern China. Not one of the most important, the most important. He documented villages where every household had jujube trees, where the dried fruit was stored in clay jars and eaten through winter as a primary caloric source, where children ate dried jujubes, the way American children ate candy, except the jujube was feeding them iron, vitamin C, and complex carbohydrates, while the candy was rotting their teeth. He shipped hundreds of jujube varieties to the USDA plant introduction station. He wrote detailed cultivation notes. He begged Washington to establish jujube orchards across the American South and Southwest, where the climate was identical to the jujube's native range in northern China. The USDA received the specimens. They planted some at research stations in Texas, Georgia, and California. They distributed a few to curious farmers who sent enthusiastic reports about a fruit tree that survived Texas drought without irrigation and produced sweet fruit with zero spraying. The early results were so promising that a small jujube research program was established at the USDA station in Chico, California. Then funding was redirected. The apple industry needed research dollars. The peach industry needed breeding programs. The citrus lobby wanted pest control funding. Every established fruit industry with existing political connections and lobbying infrastructure directed research dollars toward their crops and away from a newcomer that threatened to make their spray dependent. Input-heavy, short-lived orchards look embarrassingly inefficient. The USDA published a handful of bulletins about jujube between 1920 and 1950. Then the publications stopped. The research station collection was neglected. Several irreplaceable varieties that Frank Meyer had risked his life to collect died from lack of basic maintenance, not from disease, not from pests, from neglect. A government that spent billions subsidizing apple, peach, and citrus production could not fund a single technician to water the jujube collection. And then they moved on. The most promising fruit tree that Frank Meyer risked his life to deliver was filed away, underfunded, and gradually forgotten. Meyer himself drowned under mysterious circumstances in the Yangtze River in 1918 at age 43. The man who walked across China to bring America its most valuable fruit never saw it planted at scale. Some historians believe he was murdered. The case was never solved. And the fruit he died collecting is still virtually unknown in the country he died serving. Here's what Frank Meyer knew about this fruit that the American food industry needed you to never learn. The jujube fruit, when dried naturally on the branch, transforms into something that has no equivalent in Western agriculture. The moisture drops from 80% to less than 20%. The sugars concentrate, the flesh turns from crisp apple texture to dense, chewy, honey-like caramel. The flavor is a combination of dates, honey, and caramel apple with hints of cinnamon. The nutritional density multiplies as the water leaves. A 100-gram serving of dried jujube contains 79 grams of carbohydrates for immediate energy, 250 to 300 calories, 69 milligrams of vitamin C, nearly the entire daily requirement, significant iron at 1.2 milligrams per serving, potassium at 250 milligrams, and a suite of bioactive compounds that Chinese medicine has relied on for 5 millennia. Honey contains 82 grams of sugar per 100 grams. Jujube contains 79 grams of carbohydrates per 100 grams, but with fiber, vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants that honey does not contain. Honey provides empty calories and antimicrobial properties. Jujube provides equivalent sweetness plus nutrition plus medicinal compounds. The jujube is not a replacement for honey. It is an upgrade. And here's the difference that destroys the economics of the honey industry. One bee colony produces 30 to 60 pounds of surplus honey per year under good conditions. A colony costs $200 to $400 to establish. It requires a beekeeper with specialized knowledge, equipment, and ongoing disease management. Varroa destructor mites kill 40 to 50% of managed colonies annually in the United States. Colony collapse disorder has devastated commercial beekeeping for 20 years. The American bee population has declined by 60% since 1947. Beekeeping is getting harder, more expensive, and more unpredictable every year. The honey supply is shrinking. Prices are rising. And 76% of honey sold in American grocery stores has been shown to be adulterated with corn syrup or rice syrup by testing conducted by Food Safety News. 3/4 of the honey you buy is not real honey. You are paying $12 per jar for flavored corn syrup in a bear-shaped bottle. The fraud is so widespread that the term honey laundering has entered the food safety vocabulary. Chinese honey, which dominates global supply, is routinely shipped through third countries like India and Vietnam to disguise its origin and avoid tariffs. Imposed after dumping investigations, the honey on your shelf may have traveled through 3 countries and 2 shell companies before reaching the bear-shaped bottle, and it may contain 0 actual honey. In 2018, the European Commission tested 320 honey samples imported into the EU. Nearly half were adulterated. The global honey supply is fundamentally compromised. You are paying premium prices for a product that may not be what the label claims. Meanwhile, a bush that produces genuine, unadulterated, 100% pure sweetener sits waiting in a nursery catalog for $12. Now consider the jujubush. One mature jujube produces 40 to 100 pounds of fruit per year. It begins producing in year 2 from planting. It reaches full production by year 4 to 5. It continues producing for 60 to 100 years. Some documented specimens in China have been producing for over 300 years. The bush costs $12 to $25 from a nursery. It requires no specialized knowledge, no protective equipment, no disease management program, no varroa mites, no colony collapse disorder, no beekeeper certification, no annual hive inspections, no queen replacement, no winter feeding. You plant it, You wait 2 years. You harvest 80 pounds of honey-flavored fruit every fall for the rest of your life. Then your children harvest it. Then their children harvest it. The bush survives temperatures from -20 degrees Fahrenheit to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. It survives drought that kills every other fruit tree in the orchard. Its root system penetrates so deep that once established, it finds water that surface-rooted crops cannot access. Farmers in the Gobi Desert grow jujubes commercially in areas that receive less than 8 inches of rain per year. 8 inches. The Sahara receives 3 inches. The jujube grows in conditions one step removed from the driest desert on Earth. It has 0 significant pest problems in North America. 0. No codling moth destroying the crop the way it destroys apples. No brown rot collapsing the fruit the way it collapses peaches. No spotted-winged Drosophila laying eggs in the flesh the way it devastates blueberries and cherries. No fire blight killing entire branches the way it kills pears. Nothing that jujube arrived in America without its native pests, and no American pest has figured out how to attack it. The USDA's own pest database lists no major pest or disease of jujube in the continental United States. Every apple grower sprays 15 to 25 times per season. That is not a typo. 15 to 25 chemical applications to produce the fruit that America considers its most wholesome symbol. The apple industry spends $232 million annually on pesticides alone. Every peach grower sprays 12 to 18 times. Every cherry grower sprays 8 to 14 times. The jujube grower sprays 0 times ever, season after season, decade after decade. The sprayer sits in the barn collecting dust, while the jujube bush produces perfect fruit, powered by nothing but sunlight and deep roots. You cannot spray what does not get sick. You cannot sell pesticide to a farmer whose crop has no pests. The $84 billion global pesticide industry has 0 revenue opportunity from a fruit tree that never needs treatment. This is why you have never seen a jujube in a supermarket and why no extension agent has ever recommended one. The fruit does not participate in the chemical economy. It does not generate secondary sales. It does not create customers for sprays, powders, traps, or consultants. It just produces food, quietly, cheaply, permanently. The Chinese understood this 5,000 years ago, and their relationship with this fruit puts American agriculture's ignorance into devastating perspective. In China, the jujube is not just a fruit. It is medicine, it is culture, it is history, it is identity. Chinese weddings include jujubes placed on the marriage bed as a blessing for fertility. Chinese New Year celebrations feature jujube cakes. Chinese herbal medicine practitioners prescribe jujube for dozens of conditions. Chinese soldiers carried dried jujubes as rations for 2,000 years because the fruit stored indefinitely, weighed almost nothing, and provided rapid energy and nutrition that kept armies marching when grain supplies failed. The Xinjiang region of northwestern China produces the finest jujubes in the world. The desert climate, blazing heat, extreme temperature swings between day and night, and minimal rainfall create conditions that concentrate sugars to levels that make other growing regions jealous. Xinjiang jujubes sell for $15 to $40 per pound in Chinese markets. Premium varieties sell for $80 per pound. The most expensive dried jujubes in China cost more per pound than premium coffee, and people pay willingly because the quality is extraordinary. The Comporta Materia Medica, the foundational text of traditional Chinese medicine compiled during the Ming Dynasty, lists jujube as one of the 5 most important fruits in Chinese pharmacology. It was prescribed for insomnia, for anxiety, for digestive disorders, for immune support, for blood building in anemic patients. Chinese physicians did not consider jujube a food. They considered it a drug that happened to taste like honey. Modern science has validated nearly every traditional claim. A 2017 study published in the journal Molecules identified over 200 bioactive compounds in jujube fruit, including triterpenic acids, flavonoids, polysaccharides, and alkaloids. The sheer chemical complexity dwarfs any single conventional fruit. A 2015 randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology demonstrated that jujube seed extract significantly improved sleep quality in patients with chronic insomnia. The effect was comparable to pharmaceutical sleep aids without the side effects, without the dependency, without the $4 billion that the American sleep aid industry generates annually from pills that leave you groggy and addicted. A 2019 study in the journal Food and Function found that jujube polysaccharides stimulated immune cell activity by 40 to 60% in laboratory conditions. The fruit does not just feed you, it activates your immune system while feeding you. A 2020 meta-analysis in complementary therapies in clinical practice compiled results across 26 clinical studies and concluded that jujube demonstrated significant anxiolytic and sedative properties, anti-anxiety effects. From a fruit that grows on a bush that you can plant for $12. The pharmaceutical industry sells anxiety medication generating $3.6 billion in annual U.S. revenue. Sleep medication generates $4 billion. A bush, producing fruit with clinically demonstrated effects on both conditions, grows for 60 years in your backyard for the cost of a fast food meal? The math explains the silence. Here is what makes the suppression of jujube in America different from any other plant this channel has covered. The jujube was not banned, it was not criminalized, it was not made illegal. The mechanism was more elegant and more effective than any law. It was simply never introduced to the supply chain. American supermarkets carry approximately 400 produce items. Jujube is not among them. Not because consumers would reject it, because no commercial jujube supply chain exists in America. No commercial orchard network, no distribution infrastructure, no packaging line, no shelf space allocation, no UPC code in the grocery database. The fruit that 2 billion people eat daily does not exist in the American food system. Not because it cannot grow here, it thrives here. USDA hardiness zones 6 through 10 cover the jujube's ideal range, encompassing the majority of the continental United States. It grows better in Texas than in Beijing. It grows better in Georgia than in Shandong province. The American South and Southwest are the ideal jujube climate on Earth. But building a supply chain requires investment. Investment follows profit projections. Profit projections follow market analysis. And market analysis for jujube shows a product with a 60-year productive lifespan, zero chemical input, requirements, zero pest management costs, and a bush that any homeowner can grow in their yard without purchasing a single product from the agricultural supply chain for the rest of their life. No investor funds that analysis. No corporation builds that supply chain. No board of directors approves the introduction of a product that eliminates the customer after one $12 purchase. The grocery store model depends on repeat transactions, weekly visits, perishable products that expire in days. The entire infrastructure of American food retail, from cold chain logistics to produce misting systems to expiration date labeling, exists to manage fragility, to profit from fragility, to ensure that you must return next week to buy what you consumed this week. The jujube bush is the opposite of fragility. It is permanence, and permanence is the enemy of every business model built on perishability. The American fruit industry is not designed to give you permanent food infrastructure. It is designed to sell you perishable products on a weekly basis forever. Strawberries that last for days, blueberries that mold in a week, peaches that require 20 sprays per season and a controlled atmosphere, supply chain spanning 3,000 miles. The system requires fragility. The system requires dependency. The system requires you to come back to the store next Tuesday. A jujube bush does not require you to come back. It requires you to show up once in October with a bucket. That is the entire transaction, once a year, for 60 years. The grocery industry cannot survive that model, so the grocery industry pretends the fruit does not exist. Meanwhile, in China, the jujube industry generates $9 billion annually. $9 billion. From a single fruit species, China cultivates over 700 named varieties. Some are the size of cherries, some are the size of small apples. Some ripen in August, some ripen in November. Some are bred for fresh eating, some for drying, some for juice, some for medicinal extract. The genetic diversity rivals anything in the apple or grape world, and America grows essentially none of it. There are fewer than 1,000 acres of commercial jujube production in the entire United States. China has 5 million acres. 1,000 versus 5 million. The country with the perfect climate, the agricultural infrastructure, and the consumer spending power to dominate global jujube production grows 0.02% of the world's supply. That is not a market failure, that is a market decision. A decision made by industries that cannot profit from a fruit that makes their products unnecessary. Now here's where I need to be straight with you, because hype without honesty is just advertising. Jujube is not a perfect honey replacement in every application. Fresh jujube tastes like a crisp, mildly sweet apple. It does not taste like honey until it is dried. The drying process concentrates sugars and transforms the flavor profile. If you want honey-like sweetness, you need dried jujube, not fresh. Jujube does not produce a liquid sweetener the way honey does. You cannot drizzle jujube on toast. You can blend dried jujube into paste, syrup, or butter that functions similarly, but it requires processing. Chinese cooks have done this for millennia using simple kitchen techniques, but it is not the same as opening a jar of honey. Climate matters. While jujube survives extreme cold and heat, it requires long, hot summers to fully ripen and develop maximum sugar content. In zones 5 and below, fruit may not ripen completely before frost. In cool maritime climates like the Pacific Northwest, sugar development may be insufficient for drying. The plant grows everywhere. The fruit quality peaks in hot, dry summers. Cross-pollination improves yield. Most jujube varieties are partially self-fertile, but planting 2 or more varieties increases fruit set by 50 to 100%. 1 bush works, 2 bushes work better. This is not a limitation so much as an opportunity to grow to varieties and extend your harvest season by a month. I am telling you this because the plant deserves accuracy, not mythology. It is remarkable enough, without exaggeration, a fruit that dries itself on the branch into honey-flavored food, survives extreme conditions, produces for decades, and requires 0 chemical inputs, does not need embellishment. It needs planting. Here is your action plan. Buy 2 jujube trees from a specialty nursery. The 2 best varieties for American growers are Lee and Lang. Lee produces large, round fruit, ideal for fresh eating and drying. Lang produces elongated, pear-shaped fruit with the highest sugar content for drying into honey dates. Plant both for cross-pollination and variety. Expect to pay $20 to $35 per tree. They ship bare root in spring. Plant in full sun, the hottest spot in your yard, the spot where the concrete reflects heat, the spot near the south-facing wall. Jujube loves heat the way blueberries love acid soil. Give it what it craves. Dig a hole twice the width of the root system. Plant at the same depth as the nursery mark on the trunk. Water weekly for the first growing season. After year 1, stop watering entirely unless you live in true desert conditions below 10 inches of annual rainfall. The root system will find its own water. It has been doing this in Chinese deserts for 5,000 years. Trust it. Do not fertilize. Jujube is adapted to poor alkaline soils that would kill blueberries and struggle to support apples. Excess nitrogen produces vegetative growth at the expense of fruit. The tree does not want your fertilizer. The fertilizer company wants you to buy it anyway. Ignore them. Save that $1.35. One additional fact that the nursery industry hopes you overlook. Jujube spreads by root suckers. Underground, the root system sends up new shoots that become independent bushes. 1 tree becomes 2, 2 becomes 4. Within a decade, a single $12 purchase has become a grove without spending another cent. You can dig up the suckers and transplant them anywhere. Give them to neighbors. Start an orchard. The bush propagates itself. For free, without anyone's permission or anyone's patent. In year 2, you will see first fruits. Small, scattered, exploratory. The tree is testing its new home. By year 4, production accelerates. By year 7, you are harvesting 40 to 60 pounds. By year 10, full production of 80 to 100 pounds per bush annually. To make honey dates, do nothing. Literally nothing. Leave the fruit on the tree until it wrinkles and turns dark reddish-brown. This happens naturally as fall temperatures cool and humidity drops. The fruit dries itself on the branch. No dehydrator required. No processing. No energy input. The bush produces packages and preserves its own product while hanging in the air. Pick when wrinkled and chewy. Store in a jar at room temperature. They keep for 12 months without refrigeration. Some Chinese families store dried jujubes for 2 to 3 years in clay vessels. The economics are elegant. 2 trees cost $50 total. They produce for 60 years minimum. At mature production of 160 pounds combined annually, at dried jujube market prices of $8 to $15 per pound. Compare that to honey. To bee colonies cost $400 to $800 to establish. Annual management costs run $200 to $500 per colony. Annual colony replacement due to DOFS averages 40%. Over 60 years, a beekeeper spends $50,000 to $100,000 maintaining 2 colonies that produce less sweetener than 2 jujube trees that cost $50 once and never require management again. The jujube does not get colony collapse. The jujube does not require antibiotics for foul brood. The jujube does not suffer from varroa mites. The jujube does not need sugar water feeding in winter. The jujube does not sting your children. The jujube does not die when the neighboring farm sprays neem. There is a Chinese proverb that predates recorded history. It says, "Eating 3 jujubes a day keeps you young forever." The Western version, "An apple a day keeps the doctor away," was popularized in the 1860s. The Chinese were saying it about jujubes 3,000 years earlier, and the nutritional data suggests the Chinese proverb was more accurate. But China is not the only civilization that understood this fruit. Korea cultivates jujubes as a ceremonial food. They appear in every traditional Korean wedding as a symbol of fertility and abundance. Iranian cuisine features jujube in dozens of dishes. Pakistani and Indian communities grow jujube varieties called bear that have been cultivated for 4,000 years. The fruit crosses civilizations, religions, climates, and continents. It is one of the few foods that appears independently in the agricultural traditions of cultures that never communicated with each other. When a fruit appears on 3 continents independently across 5,000 years of human history, it is not a coincidence. It is a consensus. Billions of people across thousands of years arrived at the same conclusion. This fruit is essential. In America, with perfect growing conditions and the world's largest consumer market, grows essentially none. Frank Meyer walked 1,800 miles to bring this fruit to you. He crossed deserts and mountains and rivers. He ate food that made him sick. He slept in places that would horrify a modern traveler. He sent back hundreds of varieties with detailed growing instructions written in careful handwriting by lamplight in village inns. He wrote letters begging Washington to take this seriously. He told them this fruit could change American agriculture forever. He told them this bush could feed families in conditions where nothing else survived. He was ignored. Then he was forgotten. Then he died at 43, possibly murdered. In a river 6,000 miles from the research station, where his specimens sat in pots, waiting for a planting program that never came. His body was recovered downstream 3 days later. His notebooks were shipped to Washington in a wooden crate. His legacy was filed in a cabinet. His jujubes survived him. They are still fruiting today. 117 years later, his jujube varieties are still in the USDA germplasm collection. Still alive, still fruiting, still waiting for a nation to notice what one man gave his life to deliver. The honey industry does not want you planting jujubes. The sugar industry does not want you knowing they exist. The pharmaceutical industry does not want you growing a bush that addresses insomnia and anxiety without a prescription. The fruit industry does not want you harvesting 80 pounds of sweetener from your backyard every October while their strawberries rot on the shelf after 4 days. The jujube does not care about any industries. It does not understand supply chains. It does not respond to market analysis or investor projections or grocery store shelf space allocations. It just fruits every fall, without fail, without asking, for 60 years, dropping honey from its branches for anyone patient enough to plant it and wise enough to wait 2 seasons for the first harvest. 2 trees, $50, 60 years of pure sweetness. No bees required. If this opens something for you, subscribe and hit the bell. Every like and every share helps spread this knowledge. The next one drops soon.